Wisdom under authority. We're going through the book of Ecclesiastes, as you all know, in a series I'm calling A Control Freak's Guide to Joy. One of the things we've been seeing over and over is that life is unknowable and uncontrollable. Our times and seasons do not always go according to our schedule and plan. Often things happen to us, even huge things, that we never saw coming. One car wreck can change the course of one's life for the rest of his life. Someone asked last week, I think, about how we can find, I think this was the question. I'm going to answer what I thought was the question. So how we balance, find a balance between gripping on to life with a death grip and trying to have control, or never planning anything, never making a plan, never having a goal. It's not a bad thing to think ahead and having goals and a plan to achieve those goals. That's not a bad thing. That's not what we're seeing in Ecclesiastes. A schedule is not a sin. You can roll off the roof on one side or the other here. Being in control is not the same thing as being a control freak, right? That's important. Being in control is not the same thing as being a control freak. I think James shows us a good balance in this regard. James chapter 4, 13 through 17 says this: "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." James obviously is taking this right from Ecclesiastes. Instead, he says, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Again, listen to verse 13. "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit." Well, that sounds like a plan, right? That sounds like a one-year business plan. And then in verse 14, he reminds them what we've seen over and over in Ecclesiastes: arrogance and foolishness fail to acknowledge or accept the fact that life is a mist that comes and goes, that life is short and unpredictable and uncontrollable. But his solution is not to say, so quit planning and never make a schedule, never set goals. That's not what he says. He simply says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we'll do this and this and this. If the Lord wills. Based on the vaporous nature of life and how we are not in ultimate control of what happens to us, we should plan accordingly. We should plan with the uncertainty and humility. We should plan with that uncertainty, that humility, with that attitude. We should plan with a pencil. We should plan with a pencil. He doesn't say, do not say we will live and do this or that. He says, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Saying, if the Lord wills, is humbly admitting that our times are entirely in God's hands. Right? That's what it's saying. You're acknowledging the fact that, yes, I have a plan, but God is sovereign. We have to be willing and ready for God to change our plans anytime he chooses, because he will. He will. Verse 16 says, as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Failing to have an if the Lord wills attitude with our goals and plans is evil boasting and arrogance. Really, it's arrogance. You don't have to throw the plan out with the mist. You remember that life is a mist and don't always go according to our plans. Doesn't always go according to our plans. Remember that God has already planned everything before the foundations of the world. He's already done that. So it's arrogant of us to think that our plan trumps God's plan. So you know how those tightrope walkers carry a big stick that help them balance on the rope? You guys ever done that before? No. Well, the simple phrase, if the Lord wills, is our big stick that keeps us from rolling off the roof on one side or the other in this area. Proverbs 19:21 says, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of Yahweh that will stand. It's the purpose of Yahweh that will stand. Yes, we're going to have plans. Yes, we have many plans. Yes, we have a schedule or goals, but it's the purpose of Yahweh that will stand. Proverbs 16:9 says, the heart of a man plans his way, but Yahweh establishes his steps. We saw this in the life of Joseph. Joseph was a dreamer and probably a planner, but being a slave to Potiphar and then a prisoner wasn't part of his plan, right? None of that was part of his plan. But God had a bigger plan, and he meant it all for good. Something happening out there? Are we good? I get a little nervous when I see everybody looking out the window. God can even stop the plans of nations. Listen to Psalm 33, 8 through 12. Let all the earth fear Yahweh. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. Yahweh brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of Yahweh stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is Yahweh, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. God is God, and we are not. Write that phrase at the top of your calendar. Or if you want to write another one, write, if the Lord wills. That'd be a good thing at the top of the calendar, top of the schedule. With all that being said, let's everybody stand in reverence for the reading of God's inspired, holy, living, infallible word. Ecclesiastes 8, 1 through 17. These are the words of God. Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. I say, keep the king's command, because of God's oath to him. Be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there's a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. For he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? No man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. All this I observed while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy places and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vapor. Because of the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. There is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity or vapor. And I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, so we'll kind of fly through it faster than normal. One of the things that helps us know whether or not we have control in the middle of all the mixed signals we get in life is wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom that tells us exactly what to do in every situation. That's just another way of grasping at the mist. The kind of wisdom we can have when we don't have control over our lives. We can have this kind of wisdom from God when we don't have complete control. So he starts by saying in verse 1, who is the wise? And who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. Who is like the wise? Part of the answer to that question is in the next phrase. And the one who knows the interpretation of a thing. The one who knows an interpretation of a thing. A wise person will be able to interpret a thing or a situation when it's not obviously clear. A wise person can interpret situations and circumstances when it's really not cut and dry. Craig Bartholomew put it this way. In context, knowing how to act in a particular situation is the most relevant aspect of the expertise of a wise person. The second half of verse 1 is interesting. It says, a man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. Now he's talking about the effect that wisdom has on the one who has it, right? The effect that wisdom has on the person who possesses it. It will make his face shine, and it will change the hardness of his face. Even though things are out of his control, he won't be displaying panic. He won't be displaying anxiety. He has wisdom. A man's wisdom makes his face shine. When people greet each other, most common greeting when we see someone we haven't seen for a little bit, we say something like, how you doing, right? And then usually the common answer is something like, good, how are you? Right, that's the most common. Sometimes when someone says that to me, I'm good, I'll say, tell your face that. Because they're obviously not doing good, or they're not even fine, right? You can say other things, like my grandpa used to say when they said, how you doing? He'd say, man, you wouldn't believe. So I did that for a while too. My dad likes to say, I'm too blessed to be depressed. How you doing? Too blessed to be depressed. Dave Ramsey, I like his. What's his? It's better than I deserve. Yeah, how you doing? Better than I deserve. Or you can say, if I had a tail, I would wag it. Well, that's what our text is kind of saying. When someone has this kind of wisdom, they will know what to do in certain situations, and it will show. It will show. They're able to keep calm and carry on. He's going to be talking about more ways we are not in control that can tend to darken our face and harden our face, but wisdom prevents the uncontrollable things from controlling your face. Wisdom can lighten your face and soften your face. It works better than free creams and lotions. Wisdom helps us know what to do when it's not that clear what we should do. And this is why he's going to now talk about being under a king who has all the power. He's going to be saying some stuff today in our text that doesn't feel right to some of us who might like the don't tread on me flag. He's going to be saying, spoiler alert, obey the king. We have to realize, though, that he's not giving any kind of political statement or political theory. He's not evaluating whether the king's commands are right or wrong. That's not the point of this text. There's other texts for that. He's simply explaining the wise thing to do when you're in this situation that's out of your control. Verse 2, he says, I say, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. The phrase to him is not in the original Hebrew, and so it might be about God's oath to the king or your oath to God about obeying the king, but he does say, keep the king's command. Of course, the first thing people like us, who know that the Second Amendment is more than about hunting, right? We have the Second Amendment because we saw what happened when King George abused his power. So we know that it's for defending against a tyrannical government. So this is kind of hard to hear. And we might ask, of course, our first question would be, obviously, well, what if the king's commands are commanding us to do evil? But that subject is not what Solomon is addressing here. He's mainly dealing with what to do when you are not in control. He's not saying that we should obey the king when his commands cause us to disobey God. He's only saying that when we find ourselves in this sort of situation, we need wisdom to pick our battles, right? We need wisdom to pick our battles. Wisdom guides us in knowing how to behave with those who are in authority over us, how to act, what kind of attitude we should have with those who are in authority. For example, Proverbs 25, verse 15 is a good example of this. It says, with patience, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone. With patience, a ruler may be persuaded. If you want to persuade a ruler, be patient. Don't come in just belligerent and demands. Use wisdom. If you want to have somebody persuaded, especially in authority over you, you need to have patience. That's what we're talking about here. Using wisdom under authority. Look at the next verse in our text, verse 3. It says, be not hasty to go from his presence. Be not hasty to go from his presence. It's a little tough understanding this from the Hebrew. It could mean do not take off from the king's court without knowing what he means by his command. Or it could mean that you need to respect authority and not just try to get out of there as quick as you can. It's kind of a little confusing at what it means, but it says, do not be hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. All right, what does that mean? Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. As far as I can tell, not taking a stand in one of his evil causes is not the same thing as not taking a stand when he's causing you to do evil. Does that make sense? Not taking a stand in one of his evil causes is not the same thing as not taking a stand when he's causing you to do evil. Again, you have to pick the hills you're willing to die on. Evil kings are going to do what evil kings do. You're going to need wisdom in knowing when to take your stand. You're going to need wisdom to know when to take your stand. Luther figured it out when he said, here I stand, I can do no other. He came to the point where he had to take a stand. He used wisdom. Ecclesiastes 8:4, the next verse, for the word of the king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? Wisdom tells us the default attitude under authority is submission, but that doesn't mean that there are no exceptions to the rule. And wisdom also tells us that you don't just shout out to a king, what are you doing? Right? Use discretion, use wisdom. Verse 5, whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. This is more of not an absolute statement, but a principle of wisdom. Sometimes under evil tyrants, evil things will happen to even those who comply. But usually one who keeps the command will be safer than he who rebels. But we can't ignore the second half of verse 5, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. Back in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, we saw that God controls our times and our seasons. Now we're seeing that he also controls who reigns, who's king. God is sovereign, right? He sets up kings. He's the one who allows us to have, the reason we have the kind of government we have today is because God is sovereign. It's exactly because God is sovereign. And there's not been a national repentance. There's not been any repenting. People are still either hate America or they're proud to be Americans. They're not repenting. And so God gives us the government we need. He's sovereign. But it also says in Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of Yahweh. He turns it wherever he wills. He turns the heart's king wherever he wills. I like what the Reformed Expository Commentary, how they put it. It says, we must trust that the world isn't aimlessly whirled about, but that the Creator of all also sustains, nourishes, and cares for everything he has made, even to the least sparrow. Everything is directed by the secret stirring of God's hand. So then, in subordination to those in authority over you, teachers, parents, bosses, presidents, and others, shows an attitude of ingratitude and a mistrust in God. Be like Daniel instead. Do not compromise, but be discreet, respectful, loyal, diligent, and willing to suffer through wrongdoing. In other words, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, as you serve your earthly masters, knowing that you serve the Lord Christ. And it quotes Colossians 3. That's the Reformed Expository Commentary. Again, verse 5, whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. Wisdom is what helps you know what to do when you don't know what to do. It helps you know what to do when you're not in control of the situation. And then verse 6, for there is a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. You may be in a horrible situation or under a tyrannical circumstance, and your trouble lies heavy on you. But even then, there's a time and a way for everything. Wisdom will find a way. Wisdom will find a way. Verse 7, for he, speaking of men in general, he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? Things happen to us that are outside our control or our understanding. We don't really know what is to be, and this is why we desperately need wisdom. And this is why, once again, we see that God is God and we're not. Jeff Myers puts it this way. He says, children have such a hard time getting this right, precisely because they are immature. They go about dealing with their parents in the wrong way and then are rebuked. Thus they get the false impression that they have no way to be heard, no voice, no way to talk to their parents about decisions that are made. It is precisely when they mature that they grasp the right way to appeal to authority. It's Myers. All right, verse 8. No man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. Here he's reminding us again that we're not in control. Not only do we not know what to say in the presence of a king whose decisions we disagree with, we also have no control over all the areas of our life. And again, death is the great reminder of this. All of us will come to that final day when we take our last breath, and when that happens, there's nothing we can do to change it. Hebrews 9:27 says, and just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. God is the one that appoints that time for us. Then he says there's no discharge in our text, no discharge from war. Here's another example of being stuck with our lot in life. If you've been drafted by the king into war, I mean, this is serious, out of control, out of your control. If you've been drafted by the king into war, you can't just decide to go on vacation. Phil Ryken explains, this situation of the soldier brings together two of the main themes of this passage. Of all things that a government commands people to do, this is the most demanding, namely to defend their country. It is also the duty that brings the most danger, and with that danger, the most uncertainty about the future. A soldier in wartime deals with the real possibility of death at any moment. He, of all people, knows that he does not have knowledge of the future or power over the day of death. Nevertheless, a soldier must do what he's commanded to do. That's C.R.E.C. That's such a good point, because a soldier in battle knows very well things are outside of his control. When bullets are flying by or arrows are flying by back in the day, your future is uncertain. You gain a heart of wisdom fast. Maybe. Then he says, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. I should just say this is because this is Memorial Day, what a perfect example to remind us of all those that, laid their lives down, that were lost in battle. All right, then he says, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. The solution to not being in control is not wickedness. That won't deliver those who are given to it. And then verse 9, all this I observed while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt. Abuse of power is the reality of life in this fallen world. Wisdom helps us see even the dark realities of life. Verse 10 and 11, when I saw the wicked buried, they used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity or vapor, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily. The heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Death, again, has a way of putting all the pleasures and pains of life into perspective. It's the reality coming to all of us. Columbus Stewart said, awareness of mortality exerts a unique power to focus the mind and heart on essentials. Even though the wicked seem to get away with their wickedness in life, they too will die. And he says in verse 11, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Because the wicked go unpunished, it often encourages others to follow their example into evil. They're getting away with it. They're not getting punished. Why can't I? He brings up this injustice again in verse 14. Skip down to that. There's a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity. Again, C.R.E.C explains that. He says, oh, the injustice of it all. If God is righteous, then we would expect him to reward the righteous and punish the wicked. Yet often he seems to do exactly the opposite. Good people have troubles that only bad people deserve, while bad people get what only good people deserve. Life is unfair. Life is messy. Things don't always go the way we think they should. But death is coming for all of us. Don't get distracted by all the injustice. Don't get distracted by all the unfairness of life and forget the bigger picture. Right? It's easy to get all bothered about all this injustice and unfairness and just get all worked up and just always be angry at that. And you just forget the bigger picture. And verse 12, though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God. It will be well with those who fear God because they fear before him. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and understanding. In spite of what you see happening in life, you need to base your decisions on what you know. Not what you see, not what you feel, but on what you know. He says, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God. He knows it. I like how Myers puts it in his commentary. Like Jesus, Solomon makes it very clear that judgment awaits those who think who think that they can get away with evil in human society. If judicial sentence is delayed or even derailed, that does not mean that people get off scot-free. This is why it's so important for a society to have a kind of corporate Christian conscience. Without a conviction of God's judgment on the last day, there are no restraints on wickedness other than the civil punishments inflicted by the civil authorities. And without a societal conviction that God will administer perfect justice at the last day and correct what went wrong in human history, then the state must become godlike and seek to spy on everyone, regulate all of life, and punish every little infraction. That's Myers. He says we need this kind of understanding that there's going to be a final judgment. If the nation's full of atheists, the only restraint that can be made is from the government. The state must become God. In fact, you might have heard this, but Joe Rogan recently on a podcast was kind of acknowledging that very thing, how we need we need Christianity in order for the society, because this world's getting so out of control. And he's not at all a Christian. And he's saying we need Jesus. Listen, here's what he said. But I think as time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief in the sanctity of love and of truth. And a lot of that comes from religion. A lot of people's moral compass and the guidelines that they've used to follow to live a just and righteous life, this comes from religion. And unfortunately, a lot of very intelligent people, they dismiss all the positive aspects of religion because they think that the stories are mere superstitious fairy tales, that they have no place in this modern world, and we're inherently good, and your ethics are based on your own moral compass, and we all have one. And that's not necessarily true. We need Jesus. I think for real, like if he came back now, it would be great. Joe Rogan. Probably wouldn't be so great for him. I don't know if he realizes that. Of course, he's kind of laughing when he said it, but he's seeing the insanity of this clown world that we are now experiencing and sensing our need for some transcendent, infinite reference point. He can see that. In spite of the fact that the wicked seem to be getting away with their wickedness, they too will finally die and face judgment. And again, as Solomon says, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God. The fear of the Lord is realizing that God is holy, holy, holy. That's what Troy read in the reading today. In the year King Uzziah died, Isaiah gets brought into the temple, and he sees the holiness of God, and he says, I'm undone, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live amongst people of unclean lips. R.C. Sproul defines Coram Deo. We talked about this, I think, last week as well, maybe during the question and answer time. But he defines living Coram Deo like this, because I think that's a good definition of living in the fear of God, or fearing God, is living Coram Deo. He says to live Coram Deo is to live one's entire life in the presence of God, under the authority of God, to the glory of God. And this is my favorite definition by Ed Welch on the phrase, the fear of the Lord. He says, the fear of the Lord is knowing that I live Coram Deo before the face of God. It is knowing that the holy God sees every aspect of my life. The result is that we live knowing that we are seen. We live knowing that we are seen. We live publicly and follow Christ in joyful and reverential obedience. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith, not by sight. We walk by faith, not by sight. Not by what we can see. Because what we can see tells us wicked men get away with their wickedness, so we might as well do evil. We might as well do evil. But faith tells us there's more to reality than what we can see, and that is judgment. Verse 13 says, but it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. We're going to see this at the end of Ecclesiastes 2. The very two last verses of Ecclesiastes say this: the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And then back to our text, verse 14 again says, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, and there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vapor. Yes, bad things happen to good people. That's life. But we shouldn't get so upset about trying to figure out why this happens that we fail to enjoy God's good gifts in life. And that's what we see next in our text, verse 15. Man, I was going to spend the whole sermon on this verse, but we're just going to read it and fly over it. We'll get into it. It kind of repeats it in the next chapter, so we'll come back to it. Circle back. Ecclesiastes 8:15 says, and I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. We will not be able to solve or understand all the injustice and the unfairness of life, but we can still enjoy life. He says, for man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be joyful. Enjoy the roller coaster of life. You can't control it, but you can enjoy it. Give up your role as control freak and just eat, drink, and be joyful. Let God be God and enjoy the ride. Let God be God and enjoy the ride. Then verses 16 through 17 says, when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. I like how Michael Eaton sums that up. He says, his conclusion is that we must be content not to know everything. Neither hard work, toil, persistent endeavor, seeking, skill or experience, wisdom, will unravel the mystery. Wise men may make excessive claims, they too will be baffled. In other words, God is God and we're not. Now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, to God who alone is wise, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. Please stand. All right. Well, today, again, being Memorial Day, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how this table is a memorial table. Now, on this day, we honor those who died in battle, who died serving the country. But here, we have a memorial meal so today, on Memorial Day, we remember those who have passed. Here at the table, the main thing happening is God remembers the death of Jesus on our behalf. He remembers the once and for all final sacrifice, and then he rose again, he conquered death, went to the right hand of the Father. So this meal reminds God, not that he needs a reminder, but he set it up this way for a reason. It's a memorial meal, and we are invited to the table. And God remembers that Jesus took on flesh. He was broken and went to the cross and was crucified. He took on our sin. He took on our curse. He took on our guilt. And then he took it all upon himself and took it to the cross. And now he gives us his righteousness so that we can be invited to the table, so that we can remind God, the Father, that we are covered in the righteousness of Christ. And we are welcome to the King's table.